You know what nobody tells you about those guards outside Buckingham Palace? They're not statues. They're not actors. They're men who have been broken down and rebuilt, piece by piece, just so they can stand still for 2 hours without their bodies betraying them. I learned this the hard way, not because I wanted to, because I was there the day one of them almost didn't make it. My name doesn't matter much. I was a tourist that afternoon, the kind who flies in from somewhere far away with a small camera and a list of places he promised his daughter he'd photograph. London in late June, warmer than I expected, the kind of heat that sits on your shoulders and doesn't move. I'd been outside the palace for maybe 40 minutes. The crowd was thick. American voices, French voices, a school group from somewhere in Eastern Europe pushing past me to get closer to the gate. A toddler crying because his ice cream had fallen on the pavement. And there he was. The guard. Bearskin hat pulled low over his eyes, red tunic buttoned tight against the heat, a rifle held against his shoulder like it weighed nothing. He was younger than I'd expected. You forget that sometimes. You see the uniform and you think of history, of paintings, of old men with medals, but under that hat he was probably 22, maybe 23. I watched him for a while because I had nothing better to do. His face didn't move, not a twitch, not a blink that I could catch. Sweat was running down from under the bearskin, sliding along his temple, catching on his jaw before it dropped into his collar. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't shift his weight. He just stood there, eyes forward, breathing so slowly I started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A breath out. That's when I started to wonder how a person does that. How a body that's made of muscle and blood and nerves just decides for 2 whole hours that it won't move, won't sway, won't faint, won't collapse. I didn't know yet that I was about to find out. The thing about standing still, really still, not just I'm waiting in line still, is that it's harder than running. Most people don't know that. I didn't know that. I thought soldiers stood still because they were tough, because they were trained to ignore pain, because they had discipline. That's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. A few weeks after I came back home, I couldn't stop thinking about that guard, about what I saw, so I started reading. I started talking to people who knew people. A friend of a friend had a cousin in the British Army, and through him I ended up on the phone one evening with a man who'd served in the Coldstream Guards for 9 years, retired now, lived somewhere in Yorkshire. He didn't want his name out there, so I'll call him Tom. Tom told me everything. He said the first thing they do, before you ever put on that uniform, is they take you apart medically. Not just a quick once-over, not the kind of physical you get at a desk job. They examine you the way a mechanic examines an engine he's about to push to its limit. Blood pressure sitting and standing. They make you stand for 15-20 minutes and then check it again. They want to see what your body does when it isn't allowed to move. They check your heart rate, resting, active, recovery. They want to know how fast it climbs and how fast it comes back down. Tom said they took an ECG on him 3 different times during his first week of medical screening. Once at rest, once after a treadmill test, once while he was made to stand at attention for 30 minutes in a hot room. They were looking for something specific, he told me. His voice was rough, the way old soldiers' voices get. They wanted to know if my heart could handle the pooling. I asked him what he meant by pooling. He laughed a little, not a happy laugh, the kind of laugh men give when they remember something painful but useful. When you stand still for a long time, he said, your blood pools in your legs, gravity. Your heart has to work harder to push it back up. If your heart's not strong enough or your veins don't squeeze right, you faint. Doesn't matter how tough you are. Doesn't matter how much you want to stay upright. Your body just shuts off. That was the first thing they tested, whether his body could fight gravity. I'm jumping ahead. Let me go back to that afternoon in London. The guard I was watching, I'll call him Daniel, because Tom told me later that the regiment had a Daniel in it that year, and the details lined up close enough. Daniel had been on post for about 90 minutes by the time I noticed something was wrong. It was subtle at first. His breathing changed. I'd been counting it almost without realizing. 5 seconds in, 6 seconds out, steady as a clock. But somewhere around the 90-minute mark, the rhythm slipped. 6 in, 4 out. Then 4 in, 4 out. Then something I couldn't quite measure. The crowd didn't notice. Why would they? They were taking selfies. A woman in a yellow sundress was posing next to the gate, holding 2 fingers up in a peace sign while her husband counted to 3. A little boy was banging on the railing with a plastic toy. But I noticed. And then I noticed something else. His left hand, the one not holding the rifle, was trembling. Just a little. Just enough that you'd miss it if you weren't already looking. I felt my stomach tight. I don't know why. I didn't know this man. I had no reason to care more than anyone else in that crowd. But there was something about watching a person fight a battle nobody else could see that made me hold my breath. He was going to fall. I knew it before he did. Tom told me that one of the strangest medical tests they do is something called the tilt table test. I'd never heard of it before. Most people haven't. You lie flat on a table. They strap you down so you can't move. Then they tilt the table until you're almost vertical, like you're standing, except your feet aren't really taking your weight. They watch your blood pressure. They watch your heart rate. They want to see if your body panics, if your blood pressure drops, if you go pale or sweaty or dizzy. Some lads failed right there, Tom said. Big strong boys, rugby players, looked like they could lift a car. Put them on that table and their bodies just couldn't handle it. Out of the program just like that. He told me about a friend of his, a lad from Newcastle, broad shoulders, a runner, the kind of soldier you'd put on a recruitment poster, who failed the tilt table on his second attempt. Sent home. Heartbroken. Never recovered, Tom said. Joined the regular infantry instead. Did fine. But he never got the bearskin. The bearskin, Tom said, is for the ones whose blood doesn't quit. I asked him what else they tested. He went quiet for a moment, then he said, eyes. Apparently your eyes have to be a certain kind of strong. Not just sharp, not just 20/20. They have to be able to focus on a fixed point for long stretches without watering, without twitching, without losing focus. They sit you in a room. They put a small mark on the wall, maybe 10 meters away, and they tell you to look at it, just look at it. Don't move. Don't blink more than you have to. Don't break focus. For 30 minutes. Then 45. Then an hour. Tom said the first time he did it, he started crying around the 38-minute mark. Not from sadness. His eyes just started watering. The muscles in his face had gone rigid, and his tear ducts couldn't drain properly. And so the tears just rolled down his cheeks while he stood there trying to keep his eyes locked on that mark. The medical officer didn't say a word, Tom told me. Just kept watching, just kept timing me. When the hour was up, he wrote something down and walked out. Didn't tell me if I'd passed or failed. I found out 2 days later. He had passed, but 2 of the 8 lads in his intake hadn't. One of them, Tom said, had perfect vision. Better than perfect, could read the bottom line of the eye chart from across the room, but his eyes twitched. Some involuntary thing. A nystagmus, the doctor called it. So small most people would never know he had it. But it meant he couldn't hold a fixed gaze for an hour without his eyes flickering. Sent home. Back in London, on that hot June afternoon, Daniel's eyes were starting to lose focus. I could see it. You wouldn't think you could see that from 20 feet away through a crowd of tourists with a bearskin hat shadowing his face. But I could, because his head had drifted just a fraction, just enough that the sunlight caught his eyes differently. And they weren't fixed anymore. They were searching, drifting, looking for something to hold on to. The trembling in his hand had gotten worse. A woman near me was complaining about her feet hurting. Her husband was telling her they could leave in a minute, just one more photo. A child was asking for water. The sun was directly overhead now, and the bearskin, that famous black bearskin hat, was absorbing every degree of it. I wanted to say something. I wanted to call out to the other guards, to the police standing further back, to anyone. But I didn't, because I didn't know if it would make things worse. I didn't know if shouting would distract him. I didn't know the rules. So I just watched. And then, exactly as I'd feared, his knees buckled. It happened so fast. 1 second he was standing. The next second his rifle was sliding, and his body was tipping forward, and his bearskin was starting to fall. The crowd gasped. A woman screamed. Someone, I don't know who, dropped a phone, and it clattered on the pavement. But here's the thing. He didn't hit the ground. Because the second his knee buckled, the second his body started to fall, 2 other guards moved. I hadn't even seen them properly before. They'd been further back near the sentry box, standing just as still, just as silent. But the moment Daniel started to go down, they were on him. Fast. Faster than I would have thought a man in that uniform could move. One of them grabbed his rifle before it could clatter to the ground. The other caught him under the arms, lifted him, and started walking him, half carrying him, toward the sentry box. It took maybe 4 seconds. The whole thing. From buckle to recovery. 4 seconds. And then there was a third guard, stepping out from somewhere I hadn't seen, taking up Daniel's position, standing in the exact same spot, in the exact same posture, as if nothing had happened. The crowd was still gasping. Phones were still being raised. Someone was saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." But the post was already filled again. The line had not broken. I didn't sleep well that night. I was staying in a small hotel in Bloomsbury, the kind of place where the heating bangs in the pipes and the windows don't quite close. I lay in bed and I kept seeing Daniel's hand. That tremble, that small, almost invisible signal that his body was losing the fight. And I kept thinking, how many times has that happened? How many tourists have stood there, taking photos, never noticing that the man in front of them was slowly being pushed past his limits by his own blood, his own heart, his own muscles? How many guards have fallen and been caught and been replaced, and the crowd has gone home and posted their photos and never known? I made a decision that night. I was going to find out. Not because it was my business. It wasn't. I was a tourist. I had a flight home in 3 days. I had a daughter waiting for photos of Big Ben and the Tower of London and the changing of the guard. But I'd seen something that afternoon that I couldn't shake. And when something gets under your skin like that, you have to follow it, or it follows you forever. So the next morning, I started asking questions. The first person I talked to was the concierge at my hotel, a polite man in his 50s, with the kind of mustache that looks like it requires daily attention. I told him what I'd seen. I asked him if he knew anyone who'd served. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "My brother-in-law, Grenadier Guards, retired 10 years ago." He gave me a number. I called it that afternoon. His brother-in-law's name was Peter. He lived in a flat in Camden, and he agreed to meet me at a pub near King's Cross. He was a tall man with a slight stoop and hands that looked like they'd worked hard for a long time. He ordered a pint and a packet of crisps, and he listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Sounds about right." He didn't seem surprised. He didn't seem moved. He just nodded like I'd told him the weather forecast. "It happens," he said, "not as often as people think, but more than the public knows." I asked him how they were trained for it. He took a long sip of his pint and looked at me, and then he started talking. And what he told me, over the next 2 hours, changed the way I look at those guards forever. Peter ordered another pint before he started. He had this way of pausing before each sentence, like he was checking the words against a memory before he let them out. I learned later that he'd lost 2 friends in the regiment, not in combat. One to a heart condition that was caught too late, one to a road accident in Germany. The pauses, I think, were for them. The medicals, he said, are not what people imagine. He told me people picture a doctor checking your reflexes with a little rubber hammer, maybe listening to your lungs with a stethoscope, maybe taking your blood pressure. That's the first 10 minutes, he said. Then it gets serious. The first real test, he explained, is something they call the orthostatic challenge. Big word for a simple idea. They make you lie down for 15 minutes, completely still. Then they stand you up fast, and they measure what happens to your blood pressure in the first 60 seconds. Your blood pressure is supposed to dip slightly when you stand. That's normal. That's how human bodies work. But if it dips too much, you get dizzy, you see stars, you faint. They want to know, Peter said, if your body adjusts quickly. Because when you're on post for 2 hours, you don't just stand still. You stand still, then you do the slow march. Then you stand still again. Then you do the salute. Every transition is a chance for your blood pressure to crash. And if it crashes when the king's car is coming through the gate, well, he shrugged. You don't want to be that lad. He told me about a young soldier in his intake, 18 years old, fit as anything, top of his class in physical training, who failed the orthostatic challenge twice. His blood pressure dropped 30 points every time he stood up. Doctor told him his autonomic nervous system was too reactive. He was a good lad, Peter said. Cried when they told him, begged for another chance. They gave him one, failed again. That was that. I asked if he could try again later, maybe after some training, maybe after some time. Peter shook his head. It's the way you're built, doesn't change. Some bodies are made for this work, most aren't. The second thing they test, Peter said, is something called the Valsalva maneuver. It sounds technical, it is, but the idea behind it is simple. You take a deep breath, you hold it, you bear down like you're trying to lift something heavy for 15 seconds, then you let it out, and they watch what your heart does. A healthy heart speeds up during the strain, slows down after the release, then settles back to normal. A heart that doesn't behave that way is a heart that might not handle the demands of standing motionless for hours. Why does that matter? I asked. Peter smiled just barely. Because when you're standing on post, you're not relaxed, you're tense, your muscles are working. Even when you can't see them moving, they're working. Your calves are squeezing, your core is tight, your back is rigid. All of that strain puts pressure on your chest. Your heart has to keep pumping through it. He told me they did the Valsalva test on him 3 times. Different positions, different durations. They wired him up to machines and they watched. I felt like a lab rat, he said, but I understood why. He paused for a long time after that. He looked into his pint. He didn't drink from it. Then he said, "You don't want to be the man whose heart stops while he's guarding the sovereign." I went back to the palace the next morning. I didn't have a reason. I just wanted to look. The crowd was smaller. The weather had turned. Gray sky, a soft wind, the kind of London morning where you can smell the rain coming. I stood across the road and I watched. There was a different guard there now. Older, I thought. His posture was different, not rigid in the way Daniel's had been, but settled. Like he'd done this 1,000 times and his body had learned the trick of it. He didn't tremble. His breathing was so slow I couldn't even count it. I wondered how many people had walked past him that morning without seeing him. Hundreds, probably. Thousands by the end of the day. A small boy in a red coat ran up to the railing and pressed his face against the bars. His mother called him back. He didn't go. He was staring at the guard, mouth open, eyes wide. "Mama, is he real?" the boy asked. His mother laughed. "Of course he's real, darling." The boy didn't look convinced. I understood the feeling. That afternoon I met Peter again. He'd offered to bring an old training manual. Not the official one, he was clear about that. Just some notes he'd kept from his early years, the kind of personal scribbling that soldiers do to make sense of things. We sat in a small cafe near Russell Square. He pulled out a notebook with a cracked leather cover. He'd flagged a few pages with bits of folded paper. "This is from my first month," he said. "I was 20. I thought I knew everything." He opened to a page covered in his own handwriting, neat and cramped, and he started reading parts of it out loud. "The legs," he read. "Calf strength tested by single leg stand, 3 minutes each side. Failure, any wobble. Quad strength tested by wall sit, 4 minutes. Failure, dropping below 90 degrees. He looked up at me. "That was just the start," he said. He told me about the foot examinations. They check the arches. They check for flat feet. They check for any kind of asymmetry, because if you stand still for 2 hours with uneven weight distribution, your spine will twist, your hips will lock, your back will start to spasm before the hour mark. They look at your feet like you're a racehorse, Peter said. He laughed at his own joke. It was the first time he'd really laughed all afternoon. He told me about the toe test. They had him stand on his toes for as long as he could with his eyes closed, arms by his sides. Most people fall over in 30 seconds. Peter said he managed about 2.5 minutes the first time. The doctor told him it was acceptable, not impressive, acceptable. "What's impressive?" I asked. 5 minutes, he said. "There was one lad in my intake who could do 6, bloke from Wales, built like a fence post. Never wobbled, never blinked. He's a senior officer now. Big career." The body, Peter said, was only half of it. The other half was the mind. He told me about the psychological screenings, long interviews, personality tests, stress tests where they'd put you in a small room with no windows and tell you to sit there completely still for an hour. No phone, no book, no clock. "They want to know," he said, "if you can be alone with yourself, because that's what standing on post is. You're surrounded by people, tourists, tour guides, children, but none of it has anything to do with you. You can't talk to them. You can't smile at them. You can't react. You are completely alone inside your own head for 2 hours, and you have to be okay with that." I asked him what he thought about when he was on post. He took a long time to answer. Finally he said, "Different things, different days. Sometimes I'd run through a song in my head. Sometimes I'd plan my next leave. Sometimes I'd think about my mum. Sometimes I'd think about nothing at all, just let the time pass." He looked out the cafe window. "The hardest days," he said, "were the ones where you couldn't stop thinking, where something was bothering you. A fight with a girlfriend, a bad letter from home, a friend in trouble. Those days, the 2 hours felt like 10. Your mind would race and your body would catch the panic and your heart rate would climb and you'd start to sweat and you'd have to use every trick you'd ever learned to bring it back down." I asked him what tricks. He smiled. "Breathe slow. Count the bricks in the wall across the road. Listen to one specific sound, a pigeon, a car horn, a child's voice, and follow it. Anything to keep your mind from spiraling." I asked Peter finally about fainting. He'd been waiting for the question, I think. He nodded. "It happens," he said. "More than the public sees. The papers love it when there's a video. Some tourist catches it on a phone and it goes around the world. But for everyone you see online, there are dozens you don't. They get pulled before they hit the ground. They get replaced before the crowd notices. They get walked into the sentry box, sat down, given water, recovered, and they're back on post within the hour." I told him about Daniel, about the 4-second recovery. He nodded again. "That's textbook," he said. "That's what we train for." The man on either side of him knew the second his knee went that he was going down. They didn't think. They moved. Years of training. The whole system is built to catch the man who falls. He paused. "Because if he hits the ground," Peter said, "in front of the cameras, in front of the public, in front of foreign visitors, in front of the world, that's a stain. on the regiment, on the crown, on everything the uniform stands for. So they catch you, always, every time. I asked him if it had ever happened to him. He didn't answer for a while. Then he said, once, my 3rd year. He told me the story. It was a summer day, not as hot as the one I'd witnessed, but humid, the air thick. He'd been on post for about an hour and 40 minutes. He hadn't slept well the night before. He hadn't eaten enough at breakfast. He hadn't drunk enough water. Small mistakes, but standing motionless doesn't forgive small mistakes. He started to feel it around the 90-minute mark, the tingling in his fingers, the slight blur at the edges of his vision, the way his ears started to ring, just a faint high tone, like a radio left on too low to hear properly. He knew what was coming. He'd been trained to recognize it. He did everything he was supposed to do. He clenched his thighs. He shifted his weight in the tiny, imperceptible way they'd taught him. He took slower, deeper breaths. It wasn't enough. His vision tunneled. The edges went gray. The sound of the crowd faded out, like someone was turning a dial down. And then he was on the ground. He didn't remember falling. He just remembered being upright, and then being held, and then being walked, and then being in the sentry box with a bottle of water in his hand and a sergeant's face very close to his, asking him if he knew where he was. He knew where he was. He'd been gone for maybe 6 seconds. 6 seconds out of 9 years of service. 6 seconds that he still thought about, sometimes when he couldn't sleep. They didn't punish me, Peter said. There's no punishment for fainting. Everyone knows it can happen to anyone. The body is the body, but you carry it. You carry that you were the one who went down, that your mates had to catch you, that you needed help. He looked at his pint. It made me a better soldier, he said. I never let it happen again. I asked him how. He shrugged. I drank water before every shift, ate properly, slept properly, and I never ever underestimated the post. The post is not about pride. The post is about endurance, about discipline, about knowing your body's limits and respecting them. He picked up his glass. Most of all, he said, the post is about trust. You trust the men beside you to catch you if you fall. They trust you to do the same. The whole line stands together, or it doesn't stand at all. He drank. I sat there looking at him, and I thought about Daniel, about the 2 guards who'd caught him, about the 3rd one who'd stepped in. I thought about how the public sees the uniform but not the body inside it, how they see the stillness but not the storm underneath, how they see the spectacle but not the science. Peter walked me out of the cafe when we were done. The rain had started. Light, just a drizzle, the kind that makes the pavement shine. He buttoned his coat. You going back to the palace? He asked. I nodded. He smiled, a small one, and clapped me on the shoulder. Look at them differently this time, he said, now that you know. He walked off into the wet evening. I stood there for a long moment. Then I walked back toward the palace. The crowd was thinner because of the weather. The umbrellas were up. A man was selling postcards from a little stand near the gate. The flag above the palace was hanging limp in the rain. And there was a guard, not Daniel, not Peter, just a guard. A young man in a bearskin in a red tunic in polished boots. I stood across the road, and I watched him for a while. His breathing was slow, his eyes were fixed, his hands were steady. And I understood for the first time what I was actually looking at. I wasn't looking at a soldier. I was looking at a man who had passed tests most people couldn't even imagine, just to stand there in the rain, in front of strangers, holding a line that goes back centuries. A man who had been measured, examined, tilted, stressed, monitored, observed, and approved. All so that on a wet Tuesday afternoon in front of a few dozen tourists, he could stand still without falling. I took out my camera, but I didn't take a photo. Some things I thought you don't take, you just watch. And then you remember,